The days after Christmas have always seemed like a blur of time, where the holidays seemed to stretch out into the cold silence of winter. This year was different. Oliver, my son, now 18, has grown into a young man, taller than me, with a confidence and sense of independence that I couldn't help but admire. But his offer to rent a trailer and escape to the mountains for a week came as a surprise. "It'll be good for both of us, Mom," he said with a disarming smile, the kind that reminded me of when he was a boy, trying to charm his way out of trouble. "Just you and me. Snowy trails, warm fires, and peace." I couldn't say no. After all, the holidays were hectic, and the thought of a carefree week in the mountains was tempting. We packed light: warm clothes, board games, and a few books for quiet evenings. Oliver took care of most of the logistics, renting the trailer, planning the route, and even creating a playlist for the trip. The drive was long but beautiful. The frost-covered trees that lined the road like postcards came to life. When we finally reached a small, secluded trailer park nestled in a snow-covered valley, a sense of peace came over me. It was perfect. Just us, the mountains, and the soothing crackling of a fireplace. As the days passed, our bond deepened in ways I hadn't expected. We settled into a rhythm. Mornings spent hiking through the quiet woods, lunches with steaming mugs of cocoa, and evenings by the campfire. Conversations that had seemed superficial at the dinner table at home now flowed freely. He told me about his dreams, his anxieties, and even parts of his life that he had kept from me until now. I found myself looking at him differently, not as the boy I had raised, but as the man he was becoming. There was a quiet strength in his demeanor, a confidence I envied. It made me realize how little I had come to rely on him since his father and I had separated. One evening, after a particularly grueling hike, we returned to the trailer, our cheeks flushed with the cold. Oliver insisted on making dinner, a simple but delicious pasta dish. As we ate by the light of a small electric lantern, I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he filled the room with his presence. "Thanks for that, Ollie," I said, using a childhood nickname I'd almost forgotten. "That was a great idea." He looked up, his blue eyes meeting mine, and for a moment the air felt charged. "It's nice just to be with you, Mom," he said quietly. "I feel like we've been so busy with life that we've forgotten how to really talk to each other." I nodded, his words striking a chord. He was right. Life was a whirlwind of school and work and responsibilities, and moments like this, pure, unfiltered connection, had become rare. That night, as the fire crackled outside and the wind howled, we sat in companionable silence. Oliver read while I stared out the window, watching the snow lazily slide to the ground. I felt grateful for him, for the young man he had become, and for the effort he had put into getting us here. It was a side of him I had never seen before that made me realize how much he cared about our relationship. The mountains had an unspoken magic. Every moment in their presence felt like a scene plucked from a storybook, and Oliver seemed determined to make this week unforgettable. The morning after our late-night conversation by the fire, I awoke to the soft aroma of coffee. I opened my eyes to find Oliver standing in the doorway of the tiny sleeping nook, a steaming mug in his hand and a playful grin on his face. "Morning, sleepyhead," he teased, his voice low and warm. "I thought you deserved some breakfast in bed for being the best hiking partner ever." I laughed, sitting up and adjusting the cozy blanket around me. "Oh, now I'm the best hiking partner. I seem to remember you complaining the entire last mile yesterday." He chuckled, handing me the mug. "That was a strategy to make you laugh and keep us motivated. I'm selfless like that." The coffee was perfect, just the way I liked it, and I felt a pang of gratitude. In the quiet intimacy of the trailer, with the snow still blanketing the world outside, it felt as though the rest of the world had melted away, leaving only the two of us. "Thank you," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "This is really sweet." He shrugged but didn't look away. "You deserve it, Mom. You do so much for everyone else. It's your turn to be taken care of." His words lingered with me as we spent the morning in the cozy warmth of the trailer. Later, Oliver suggested we explore another nearby trail. I bundled up tightly against the crisp winter air, and we set off, the sound of crunching snow beneath our boots the only noise in the serene forest. The walk was perfect, long stretches of quiet punctuated by his jokes and compliments. He teased me about the way I bundled up so much that I could barely move and pointed out how the frost on my hat made me look like an adventurer in a survival movie. I swatted him playfully and he grinned, his laughter echoing through the trees. But by evening things took a sudden turn. We were heading back to the trailer after a particularly icy patch of the trail when I slipped. My foot went out from under me, and I landed hard on my side, pain radiating sharply up my leg. "Mom!" Oliver was at my side in an instant, his hands gentle but firm as he helped me sit up. "Are you okay? What hurts?" My leg, I winced, trying to move it, but the pain was sharp and unforgiving. "I think I twisted it." Without hesitation, he scooped me up, cradling me as though I weighed nothing. "Don't try to walk on it," he said firmly. "I've got you." "Oliver, I'm fine." "No arguments," he interrupted, his tone soft but commanding. "You're not fine and I'm not risking you making it worse. Besides," he added with a mischievous smile, "I've been working out just for moments like this." Despite the pain, I couldn't help but laugh. His warmth against the cold air, the steadiness of his hold, and the way he spoke to me made me feel safe in a way I hadn't in a long time. Back at the trailer, he carefully set me down on the small couch, propping up my leg with a pillow and wrapping it in a makeshift ice pack. "We'll head home tomorrow," he said, crouching beside me. "But for tonight you're staying right here. If you need anything, just say the word." As the evening wore on, I felt exhaustion creeping in, though the ache in my leg kept me restless. At some point in the night, I woke up shivering, a deep chill settling in despite the warmth of the trailer. My head throbbed, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I had a fever. "Oliver," I called weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. In seconds he was by my side, concern etched into his features. "Mom, what's wrong?" he asked, his hand brushing against my forehead. "You're burning up, but you're freezing. Hang on." Before I could protest, he climbed into the bed next to me, wrapping his arms around me and pulling the blanket snugly over us both. "You need to get warm," he said simply, his voice steady but gentle. The heat of his body seeped into mine, chasing away the shivers. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His hand rubbed slow, comforting circles on my back, and I felt my anxiety melt away. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice thick with drowsiness. "Always," he replied, his lips brushing my hair in an almost imperceptible gesture of care. "I'll always take care of you." In the quiet of the night, wrapped in his warmth, I felt a closeness I hadn't anticipated, a bond that had deepened in ways I couldn't put into words. For the first time in years, I let myself lean into the comfort of being cared for, trusting that I wasn't alone in facing the world. As sleep claimed me, I couldn't help but wonder how much this trip had changed not just my view of Oliver but the connection we shared. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't face them alone. When I woke up the next morning, the trailer was quiet except for the faint sound of sizzling. My leg ached, but the warmth of the blankets and the comforting smell of something delicious being cooked eased the edge of the pain. I sat up carefully, wincing as I moved, and saw Oliver at the tiny kitchen counter, his back to me, humming softly as he worked. "Morning," I called, my voice still a little hoarse. He turned, a bright smile lighting up his face. "Hey, sleepyhead. Breakfast is almost ready. How are you feeling?" "Sore," I admitted, "but better than last night." He nodded, his brow furrowing with concern. "I made some eggs and toast. I'll bring you a plate. After we eat, we're heading to the hospital." "No arguments." I laughed softly, touched by his protective tone. I wouldn't dream of arguing. True to his word, he set a plate in front of me and insisted on helping me with every little thing, even holding the plate steady while I ate. His attentiveness melted something inside me, and as I watched him clean up afterward, I felt a deep, swelling affection that I couldn't quite define. "Thank you," I said, catching his gaze when he turned to me. For what? He asked, his smile softening. For taking such good care of me. For being you. His eyes lingered on mine for a moment before he nodded, a faint flush rising to his cheeks. Always, Mom. The drive back down the mountain was uneventful, the snowy scenery as breathtaking as ever. Oliver kept glancing at me to make sure I was comfortable, his hand brushing against mine when he adjusted the heater. He even adjusted the playlist, skipping songs he thought might annoy me. By the time we reached the hospital, I was exhausted. Oliver helped me out of the car and supported me as we walked inside. He stayed with me through every step of the process, his hand a reassuring presence on my shoulder as the doctors examined my leg. It's just a bad sprain, the doctor said, smiling kindly as she wrapped my leg in a snug bandage. Keep off it for a few days and you'll be good as new. Oliver exhaled in relief, and I couldn't help but laugh. You look more relieved than I feel, I teased. Someone's got to worry about you, he shot back, his grin mischievous. When we finally got back home, I was beyond grateful for the comfort of familiar surroundings. Oliver helped me settle onto the couch, bringing me blankets, tea, and even the remote before he disappeared into the kitchen. You don't have to do everything, I called after him. You deserve to be spoiled, he replied, poking his head back around the corner. Let me take care of you for once. And take care of me he did. Over the next few days, he barely let me lift a finger. He cooked, cleaned, and even sat with me to keep me company while I caught up on my favorite shows. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so cared for, and it was a feeling I hadn't realized I missed. But the real shift came a few nights later. We were sitting on the couch, the glow of the TV casting soft shadows across the room. My leg was propped up on a pillow, and Oliver was beside me, his arm resting on the back of the couch. We'd fallen into an easy silence, the kind that comes when two people are completely at ease with each other. Then, out of nowhere, he spoke. Mom, he began, his voice unusually serious. There's something I need to tell you. I turned to him, my heart skipping a beat at his tone. What is it, Ollie? He hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands before meeting mine again. I've been thinking about us. About how things have felt different lately. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. Different how? He leaned forward slightly, his expression open and vulnerable. Care about you so much. More than just as my mom. I know it's complicated and maybe it's wrong to even say it, but love you. Not just as family, but as someone I admire, respect, and he paused, his voice softening. As someone I want to be close to, in every way. The air between us felt electric. His confession hanging there, raw and unguarded. My heart raced as I processed his words, the depth of his feelings and the courage it must have taken to voice them. Oliver, I began, my voice trembling. I wasn't sure what to say or how to make sense of the emotions flooding me. He had been my rock these past few days, my constant source of comfort and care. And deep down I knew I felt something too, something I hadn't let myself name. It's okay, he said quickly, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he held up a hand. You don't have to say anything. I couldn't keep it in anymore. Tears stung my eyes and I reached out, taking his hand in mine. You mean so much to me, Oliver. More than I can ever put into words. What we have, it's special and I treasure it. His hand tightened around mine, his gaze searching mine for something I wasn't sure I could give yet. But in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever path we were walking, we were in it together. Oliver's confession left me breathless, his words hanging in the air like the softest snowfall, unexpected and beautiful, but carrying a weight I couldn't ignore. His eyes, those earnest blue eyes, stayed fixed on mine, searching for some kind of understanding. I felt the world slow around us, the sound of the television fading into the background. Without thinking, I reached forward, pulling him into a hug. I wrapped my arms around him tightly, holding him close, as if letting go might shatter the fragile moment we'd found ourselves in. His warmth enveloped me, steady and grounding, and for a moment it felt like nothing else mattered. Not the complications, not the questions, just the two of us. You mean the world to me too, Oliver, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I need you to know that. His arms came around me in return, pulling me even closer. I was so scared to tell you, he murmured against my shoulder. But I couldn't keep it inside anymore. I leaned back just enough to look at him, brushing a hand through his hair like I had so many times when he was younger. But this time, the gesture felt different, tinged with a tenderness that ran deeper, a connection that was quietly reshaping itself. You're brave, I said softly. Braver than I think I've ever been. And no matter what, I'm here for you. His smile was small but genuine, and he held my gaze with a sincerity that sent warmth coursing through me. We stayed like that for a moment longer, wrapped in each other, before I shifted slightly, wincing as my injured leg throbbed. Let me help, he said quickly, his concern returning as he eased me back onto the couch. He adjusted the pillow under my leg, his hands careful and gentle. Then, to my surprise, he began to stroke my leg lightly, his touch soothing. Does this hurt? He asked, his fingers trailing along the edge of the bandage, avoiding the swollen area. No, I said, shaking my head. It actually feels nice. His touch was tender, the kind of care that made me feel seen, cherished even. It wasn't just the physical relief, it was the way he looked at me, as if tending to me was the most important thing in the world. My heart swelled, and I couldn't help but reach out to brush my fingers against his cheek. You've been so good to me, Oliver, I said, my voice trembling slightly. I don't know how I got so lucky. His hand stilled for a moment, and he glanced up at me, his expression unreadable. It's not luck, Mom, he said softly. It's just, it's how it's always been. Something unspoken passed between us then, a quiet understanding that neither of us tried to put into words. Instead, I let myself sink into the warmth of his presence, the gentle rhythm of his hand on my leg lulling me into a rare sense of peace. Do you want me to stay with you tonight? He asked after a long silence, his voice hesitant, as if he wasn't sure how I would respond. I nodded without hesitation. Yes, I'd like that. His smile was soft, almost shy, and he adjusted the blankets around me before turning off the television. The room dimmed, the only light coming from the glow of the lamp on the side table. Oliver sat beside me, his hand finding mine under the blanket, and I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder. The quiet stretched on, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt full, of understanding, of emotions too vast for words. I closed my eyes, letting myself drift, comforted by the steady rise and fall of his breathing next to me. Over the next few days, something shifted between us. It wasn't dramatic or sudden, but it was there, woven into the small moments we shared. The way he held my hand a little longer when he helped me walk to the kitchen. The way I found myself lingering in his gaze, feeling a warmth that wasn't just maternal pride. Each evening, we found ourselves on the couch together, the closeness between us growing in ways that felt both natural and new. We didn't talk about it, not directly, but it was there, an unspoken bond deepening with each passing day. One evening, as we sat side by side, Oliver surprised me by leaning over and resting his head against mine. Do you ever think about what life would be like if it were just the two of us? He asked quietly, his voice almost a whisper. I turned to look at him, my heart catching at the vulnerability in his eyes. What do you mean? He hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. I mean, no expectations, no one else to worry about. Just you and me taking care of each other. His words sent a ripple through me, a mix of emotions I wasn't sure how to untangle. That sounds peaceful, I admitted, my voice just as soft. But life's not that simple, Oliver. You know that. I do, he said, nodding. But it doesn't stop me from wishing it could be. I didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, I reached out, lacing my fingers through his. Whatever happens, I said, my voice steady, we'll figure it out. Together. He looked at me then, his eyes bright with something I couldn't quite name but felt deeply. I don't think I've ever loved anyone the way I love you, he said softly. His words more a confession than a statement. My heart swelled, and I pulled him into another hug, holding him close and refusing to let go. His arms wrapped around me tightly, as if he feared letting go might break the moment. I love you too, I whispered. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just words. It was a promise,